Good day, everyone. Welcome to the conference on Intelligent Foreign Policy, CIFP 2025, and welcome to the ASEAN Group. We'll begin shortly our first session in this room. B1, Navigating a World in a Turbulent Transition. What's ASEAN response? What can ASEAN offer? Which will be conducted in English. Bagi yang membutuhkan penerjemah ke dalam bahasa Indonesia, silakan ambil perangkat yang tersedia di dekat pintu masuk. Saat meninggalkan ruangan, mohon tinggalkan perangkat tersebut di tempat duduk Anda. We kindly ask all participants to take their seats as we will begin shortly. For those who wish to go to restroom or pay your role, please follow the signage outside the hall. Okay. To start our session, B1, Navigating a World in a Turbulent Transition. What's ASEAN response? What can ASEAN offer? I would like to invite Dr. Nata Komalfatdin, News Director at the Standard, who will moderate this discussion. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Nata.
Sawasdee in Thai. Good afternoon. Well, actually, still good morning, but we are in transition to the afternoon. And let me introduce myself. I'm Natha Kowanwatin, News Director of the Standard for Thailand. I'm very honored to be moderating this very important session. It's about how ASEAN will navigate the world in complexities with more confidence and more tolerance. And we are meeting at the moment that the whole world is not just meeting, but entering a turbulent transition. Great rivalry is competing, very intensifying, and global economic fragmentation is also accelerating. The question is, the rules-based order that ASEAN has been relying on for many decades are now under pressure. But for the turbulence, it's not external force that ASEAN cannot avoid. The issue is how ASEAN will address this very important issue with more coherence and act with strategic purpose. So today is not only about doing speech, but our speakers will have honest and interactive participation and discussion in order to address the question, can ASEAN navigate complexity in the world with more coherence and confidence? And what do we need to do in order to make ASEAN feel a stabilizing force in the next world order? Well, we have to stress the next world order, as Dr. Dino has mentioned in his opening speech this morning. So let me begin inviting our speaker on the stage. First of all, Michael Tene. It has been at the heart of ASEAN's political security material. Michael is former Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN for ASEAN Political Security Community, and he knows exactly how far ASEAN can spread under pressure. Second, Iman Hamavio. He was Director General of International Trade Negotiations of the Ministry of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia. Please join me on the stage. Iman is one of the region's most influential trade negotiators. He helped build ASEAN and has navigated the front lines of global economic fragmentation. And you were chairman of ASEAN Trade Negotiating Committee. And third, Dr. Pa Kipeng. Please join us on the stage. He's Professor of ASEAN Studies of the International Islamic University of Malaysia, Director of Institute of Internationalization and ASEAN Studies. is a scholar who analyzes ASEAN with clarity and honesty, cutting through informatic language to tell us what is really at stake for ASEAN. And last but not least, Hong Thi-ha, Senior Fellow and Co-Coordinator of the Regional Strategic and Political Studies Program at IC Utah Ishak Institute. Hong Thi-ha is someone who has lived ASEAN for within for the very beginning as the Vietnam diplomat, and then at the ASEAN Secretariat, and now studies ASEAN as a scholar. So thank you for all speakers, for you, for being with us today. So I'd like to begin with my hope, because you have worked through ASEAN and ASEAN Secretariat Office. So currently, to navigate the great rivalry between the U.S. and China, it has shaped reality of the whole world, from security, politics, technology, supply chain. So if you evaluate ASEAN, what's the strategic response of ASEAN on this great rivalry? ASEAN just like simply sitting as inactive and not leading? And what are the areas that ASEAN really take action?
Thank you very much, and great to be here to speak on this very in this forum, and welcome to our students as well. Well, for me, it's not about actually what is worrying is not about the so-called great rivalries. I think we have talked about the next order, we talk about the turbulence that faced by our region. The core issue is actually what has been mentioned by Dino at the opening, as well as you have also mentioned. The main problem for me is that the erosion of rule-based order, erosion of rule of law, and it replaced by the rule of power. This is the most worrying. It's not about the race of China, the by of US or the NICO, the two or other big outside. What is worrying is the erosion of rule-based order. There are many examples. Yeah, China has always been the champion for rules of law in various for. But when it comes to the application of UNCLOS in South China Sea, it insists on its own interpretation of UNCLOS and disregard the rulings on the arbitration reform. The U.S. has been pressuring China to adhere to the rule-based order in South China Sea. But when it comes to the multilateral trading system, the WTO rules, again, the U.S. is disregarding all its rules, its multilateral rules. The West has been preaching the world about the importance of human rights. They invented the concept of Article 3, right to protect. Yeah, and we remember back in the early 2000s when the former Republic of Yugoslavia was engaged in the war in Croatia and Bosnia. The West bombed Serbia, arrested the president, and charged at the UN established the International Tribunal Court to deal with the genocide that take place in Bosnia. But then when it comes to the issue of Palestine, where we have a very clear evidence of the genocidal policies that the Israelis, where the International Criminal Court issued the arrest warrant for the president, the West disregard. In fact, they all even tracker the text. Yeah. So what they are seeing is erosion of the rules of law, rule-based order, and nitpicking. Okay, we choose this power, this order, but it suits us. When it doesn't suit us, we can disregard. So these are the main challenges that we are facing, and this is why we are facing a region, a world that are in the press. So how ASEAN respond to experience situation? The basis is that now powers they take more tools. Yeah, like I said, instead of rules of law, we are seeing more and more application of rules of power. So ASEAN has to, at the most basic, it has to increase its power individually and collectively. Meaning that if we have to do our homework, continue to develop our economy, develop the stable or rapid internet process, but also collectively as ASEAN, because we are only ASEAN purchased a small medium out. So there's a limit what we can achieve if we do this. So we need to leverage our practice, our. That means we have to be united. Later on, if there's time, I can elaborate further what they mean by united ASEAN. Secondly, so first, ASEAN has to be outward, and secondly, we have to respect our multilateral framework that exists in this world. Because only through multilateral setting we get engaged with this big major powers. I think I'm right up time, so I must stop here, but I can further explore all these two later.
Thank you very much, Michael. You stress a lot on rules-based order in which is now changing, and it's the question of how ASEAN will coping with it. Before I come back to you, Yuman, with the asset and economic grouping of ASEAN, especially asset, I'd like to go to Kamdalafa. How do you see the action taken by ASEAN at the moment? Because ASEAN mentioned a lot of saying neutral amidst great power rivalry or having non-interference inside the group. Will it mean risk of ASEAN instead of being architecture of the next world order, but being like bystander instead?
Thank you, Dr. I'm actually brought up one of the most prestigious presenter because she has interviewed by Prime Minister 3 years ago. That's Malaysia Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, who is not so popular in Thailand right now because people has this impression that he has intervened in the affairs of two very important member states, which is Thailand and Cambodia. Coming back to the issue of intervention, interference, whatever you may call it, I am one of the more fortunate and lucky ones in the view of ASEAN, because very early on I realized that the word non-intervention should not be considered a taboo. So I do not have that fear or phobia of the word non-intervention, even though it's regarded as one of the most important principles in the conduct of ASEAN diplomatic affairs. The reason why I am not afraid of using that word is because a non-intervention, according to a very good scholar who is also a friend of mine, John Funson of Australian National University, non-intervention is rested on two pillars. On one hand, the one pillar says, as long as a member state does not openly or covertly support the opposition movement of another country, you can actually get involved in that country's campaign, such as try to help Cambodia and Thailand to resolve their differences, because we are not supporting any opposition movement. In the case of Cambodia, probably there isn't any opposition movement to begin with. Second pillar might be follow the model of Belapar, who is a very distinguished scholar at Canada. Second pillar, the reason I'm using this is because I realize that there are students here who may not understand the terminology that we use in ASEAN. So remember, the first pillar is when the member state of ASEAN comes in any issue or even any conflict, but it doesn't try to openly or covertly support the opposition movement on that country. The second pillar is when a member state of ASEAN does not openly or covertly try to criticize the military alliance of that member state or the opposing member state. So in the case of Cambodia, they move very closely at military relationship with China. Malaysia, we don't like it, but we don't say it. Philippines may have a military alliance or relationship with the United States. Again, we keep our mouth shut. But can we try to advise Philippines on how to conduct its chairmanship in ASEAN next year? Yes, we can. And based on insider information, I can go on the record to say that there is a lot of consultation between the coming chair and the current chair. And by the way, the chairmanship of Malaysia in ASEAN will only end on December 31st. What you saw on TV was just a ceremony handing over. That was just theatric, diplomacy theatric. So on Cambodia, to what extent can we actually help in resolving its conflict with Thailand? There was a conversation, a second phone call, between President Donald Trump and Ottawa on November 16th, if I'm not mistaken. And President Donald Trump said, if Thailand is moving out from the ceasefire, I'm willing to use trade embargo on Thailand to try to force Thailand to come back to the ceasefire with Cambodia. Prime Minister Anwar explained to Trump, Mr. President, let's not do that. Place your trust and faith in me, and I'll speak to Thailand and Cambodia to get the two sides to have their reconciliation in the ceasefire again. Because there has been progress in the Thai-Cambodia issue. All the big artilleries have been moved away from the border. There are landmines, no doubt. And there are even not traditional actors that put landmines there. But in that sense, there is progress in the ceasefire. Privately, Thai Prime Minister Anutin is actually very appreciative of what Prime Minister Anwar is doing. But because of the rising nationalism in Thailand, he is not in a position to do that. But behind your seat, there is a lot of goodwill, which is usually the case in ASEAN. If Michael may attest to it, even when we fight openly or behind the scene, there is still a lot of goodwill that we can use to try to reconcile our differences, not unlike the family. So I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much for illustration of how ASEAN at this very juncture under chairmanship of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, he tried to mediating the conflict, bilateral conflict, even though Thailand tried to keep it bilateral, and its very juncture is very hard, especially at ASEAN summit in Malaysia. But it's another showcase of internal division among ASEAN companies. And of course, we are facing the global context of the great power rivalry between the US and China. From your experience on how do you see the political will among ASEAN countries in order to cope with this internal division and move the agenda of ASEAN forward as the coherent and as a united grouping?
Thank you for your question. Being in ASEAN for many, many years, I realized that diversity is in the DNA of ASEAN, while unity is an ever work in progress and an aspiration that we keep working towards with a lot of ups and downs. And ASEAN doesn't exist independently as an organization like the European Commission. It is what the 11 ASEAN member states collectively want to make out of it. And of course, as you have mentioned, we have some emerging internal divisions for life, but actually they are the continuation of coming out from the fact that we are neighbors that have certain historical legacy to deal with, like the border conflict, the border disputes between Thailand and Cambodia, but not only between Thailand and Cambodia, but also, for example, between Malaysia and the Philippines as well. And that dimension, like the issue over the Philippines claim over Sabah, doesn't really feature prominently in the regional security discourse, but it actually is an important factor in the fault line between Manila and Kuala Lumpur in their responses on the South China Sea, actually. And I think there are a few problems that have been quite, worrying in the past year, but not necessarily because of the fact that ASEAN doesn't have mechanisms. We have a lot of mechanisms set up by the ASEAN Charter to help us manage our bilateral relations. Actually, the whole purpose of ASEAN in the beginning was to manage bilateral relationships among the founding countries in the 1960s. We had many mechanisms, actually. The problem is ASEAN member states somehow had lost that instinct to reach for ASEAN first when they have bilateral issues. For all the credit we had given to Trump for intervening to force Malaysia, Cambodia and Thailand to agree to a ceasefire, de-escalate tensions, the question for ASEAN is that why can't we intervene first before Trump had to set in? Because the whole purpose of ASEAN and all the mechanisms we have set up is to manage bilateral tensions, actually. And another thing that I would strongly recommend is the importance of going back to basics in ASEAN. We had set up so many mechanisms in the political security track, but we hardly use it. Dispute settlement mechanisms. The most important thing is actually not those mechanisms. The most important thing is the importance of having ASEAN leaders still capable of maintaining their personal record, the ability to call each other in times of tension, and not to use foreign policy issues to score domestic political points, and to engage in quiet diplomacy and not to use social media to seek instant gratification from your already nationalist citizens. And these are the experiences that we have seen unfold during the recent Thailand-Cambodia dispute and conflict. And that's why I think before we can think of doing all of this, like institutional reforms or ASEAN doing things big on the international or reviving multilateralism, I think ASEAN leaders, ASEAN diplomats, ministers, especially in the political track, should relearn the art of ASEAN quiet diplomacy and to build and sustain the record between the ASEAN leaders, because we are all under new leadership, actually, in many ASEAN member states, and the time it takes for them to develop the comfort level, the personal relationships to manage the relations among themselves, it will take time. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really crucial to have a kind of informal mechanism of communication that can de-escalate the conflict, the immediate conflict. Ima, let me turn focus to you on economic cooperation of ASEAN. Of course, ASEAN has our own framework of ASEAN, but to look at the global perspective with global priority, which affecting supply chain is changing, and protectionism is also rising. That means economic security is very geopolitical. But to look at ASEAN, what do we have policy of coordination among ASEAN in order to make economic precedence at this very juncture of great power rivalry?
Thank you. That's quite challenging questions. But I think I would like to resonate what expressed earlier this morning. It is about the changing world. I've been writing this last 3 months that we call the 18th century, 19th century is the best everywhere. That by this one is of Naval Subers and it could be the centuries back Mecca based on the institution that created by US, Mr. Alas, Bretton Woods Institutes. Now, there is an amazing era of Asia. And all the statistic data suggest that yes, the weight of the global trade move slightly to Asia. Asia provide contributes that are about 40% world GDP. Asia contribute 2/3 of the global population. 7 out of 10 is a sport harder keeping Asia. We understand that some countries in the region in Asia, East Asia in particular, has managed to be champion of technology, digital decades or so. So I think if you like to make sure that ASEAN can play a role in this changing landscape, ASEAN needs to fix internal process. ASEAN needs to reset our mindset because what we see the emerging ASEAN Asia is a multipolar order. There's no hegemon, no single hegemon like the UK in the Pax Britannica or US in the Pax Americana. Under Pax ASEAN, there is no single hegemon. This is a multipolar order, but this has some sort of fragility because the stability of this order rests mostly on the economic consideration of all parties. I must say that America will fade away, Europe will fade away. They will continue to be a major player in the world. But now, time for Asia to, fix himself and make growth. Because, as I said earlier, some data suggest that it's Asia to live the ruler. RCP prepares the mechanism of platform to realize this like ASEAN economic defense. But it requires ASEAN solidarity, ASEAN leaders, and that's what have been worrying for perhaps that there's got strong leaders ASEAN. What we see the last few months is political pessimism who've been the heart of Trump and his orders. So how we can expect that our next partners in the region appear will respect passage. So it's important for us to fix ourselves first before we gain this all of the decision.
But for Trump Tower, due Trump 2.0 era, what do you perceive the power of ASEC to maintain or to embrace ASEAN centrality, or what should be step up as the game of ASEAN in terms of ASEC?
Okay, RCEP could the most advanced countries in the region, emerging countries in the region, developing countries. And least developed is that Myanmar and Nigeria go. And we have Australia, we have New Zealand. I hope very soon India will rejoin as CIFP. We have China, we have Korea, we have Japan. I think that creates moral authority for our CIFP countries to speak up about decision regional value chains. But again, the ability of this platform very much rests on the solidity of ASEAN in leading the process. So okay, back to ASEAN. How we want to leverage a CIFP platform to create the resilient regional value chains, the region, and to connect ourselves to other regions. EU, for example, Latin America, North America, and everybody now look at the ASEAN will all get boobies.
Yes. But in this very juncture, we have not separate between geopolitics and geoeconomics. Even though ASEAN aims at strengthening ASEAN economically, but under this global context, do you see that ASEAN is being more fragmented politically because of economic competition?
But I think it's more of the fragmentation is more on the side that probably on the side. I have already mentioned that related with the plan of separation, there are several things as it has to be first to do it over, increasing its put power typically collectively. Secondly, need to be united, the other be able to leverage collective power. Third, the second level framework that we are reading ASEAN that because and the fifth one actually the last one I want to mention is about the needs to get the study commerce. So and all these rest on us UBT, including in dealing with the image, optimize relative perspective. But look, what are you talking about the very top of ASEAN? In the political security side, the main issue is because ASEAN countries have different security from one another. The perception aspect are different of Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, Malaysia. Some are relatively similar, but very different. We can probably have the united ASEAN if we public process or allied process is different security output. So that we can with the more or less co-supplement of the security could be much easier for ASEAN to have common voice, common consensus for political security issues. On the economic side, the basis I want to start because basically ASEAN does not agree on the obligation for its economic proposals, which is market liberalism. Market, but the outcome economic is actually boils down into how far, how fast, how deep, how wide the economic creation. But the fundamental principles operates, not the piece follow. Most of ASEAN actually the output is almost similar. Yeah, we are producing almost similar product, and that is why we are competing in the same market. But the current strategy of the developing the free trade agreement with various partners, it's a tight pack. The only question now is that whether ASEAN can really optimize the benefit from this free trade agreement. If you look at the utilization rate of the free trade agreement with ASEAN, no ASEAN is a tough time with the various free trade agreement, I think it will be the number may be significantly different from each ASEAN members. Not all ASEAN members have benefit from the high utilization rate with the various FTA. This comparison between ASEAN member states, not to mention between ASEAN and our partners who are actually benefiting from this package. So I think we need to have a closer look using indicators such as the utilization rate and other characteristics. And from that, identify what are the problems. Why are we, for some countries, accessibility there you go. Is it capacity issues or the reduces? Collectively, we can help with our partners. Because some of the we also have capacity dealing, but without they us package be Australia, Australia, usually Arkansas, Japan as well. So the point here is that we have already the necessary tools, but question is whether we can maximize these tools, like backing up set. It's about the total whole, or whether we are people over, whether we can actually make use of this platform that we are building.
Yeah. The same Michael that mentioned that ASEAN have mechanism, have tools as Michael mentioned, but the measure is how to exercise the mechanism that ASEAN has. Because we have limited time, but we have to touch upon so many aspects of ASEAN. So let me move on to the next issue, in which has been the issue for ASEAN for the whole time, Myanmar crisis. And the election is coming up in December. What does Singapore you see in terms of Myanmar crisis? And so far, with the way ASEAN dealing with Myanmar crisis, do you think it's on the right track? Especially the election is also coming up, but Myanmar issue has become very internationalized. Do you think ASEAN need institutional design framework to deal with Myanmar?
Thank you very much for the message. On Myanmar, I probably can offer some insider information or insight. From the standpoint of Malaysia Prime Minister's office, we are making progress in Myanmar, because when the Prime Minister of Malaysia met with Senior General in Ahang of Myanmar, we couldn't get a general ceasefire for a long duration of time. But we could get an agreement from Senior General with Allah on a ceasefire on a month-to-month basis. That is both a reflection of our leaders and our strength in Myanmar. And the reason I say that is because the month-to-month ceasefire seems very woolly, very weak. But in international relations, sometimes you are not dealt with the best cards. You are dealt with the very bad hands of cards, and you have to deal with the situation as it is. So the agreement with the Prime Minister or the group chair of ASEAN, Malaysia, and Myanmar is that we will do our best with Myanmar to facilitate a ceasefire, hand it one time, see how it takes progress, and then move on to the second month. And that will be the modus operandi with Myanmar. As for the election in Myanmar, we as Malaysia Prime Minister or Ministry of Foreign Affairs, from what I can gather reports and press statements that they have high doubts about the integrity and the scrupulous nature of the Myanmar election, because the current junta in Myanmar only controls up to 30% of the territory, and the elections will be held mainly in the areas that they control. In other words, even if you have an electoral outcome, 70% of the Myanmar's geography does not reflect or did not really participate in that election. So it's up to Myanmar to decide whether they want to be considered outlier or even a pariah of international community, or do they want to be seen as an actor that is on the path of normalization. But just having an election alone will not restore their legitimacy. And what more, countries such as Myanmar allows Cambodia are now subject to a lot of international action because of the scams and the illegal cyber operations that have festered in those areas. And that from the insider information that I had, originally the cyber operations began with criminal trials in Taiwan. But when the criminal type trials in Taiwan stopped doing that, they migrated to the trials in China. And China have certain elements. I'm not referring to China as a country or the Chinese Communist Party. I'm referring to the Chinese secret society. They are the ones who forged all and then broke into the respective mechanisms of the state in Laos, in Cambodia, in Myanmar, but that there are also Malaysians, former intelligence operatives who having retired or former bankers, knowingly or unknowingly, who facilitated and enabled that operation to become a global phenomenon. So the very fact that I can speak about this openly shows that we have a certain culture of openness, if we know how to use it, that can allow us to speak up when the rules-based order is breaking up. Thank you.
Thank you. Ability to speak up is really important, but the willingness to speak up is also another crucial issue. Yeah.
Can I quickly add one point to what Melon Hart was saying about the abundance of mechanisms in ASEAN to solve issues? Why OP used it and why DP enlist the United States? First of all, not that I'm defending Malaysia. First of all, I think at that particular juncture when Cambodia and Thailand were in friction, Trump was really going for the Nobel Peace Prize. So that's why he could insert itself into the whole equation. And Malaysia, regardless of how this goes out, Malaysia has an asymmetrical relationship with the United States. And therefore, we were not in a position to say no immediately. And furthermore, we got the consensus, the agreement from Thailand and Cambodia to mediate. That's why. Secondly, the reason why the mechanisms exist in ASEAN, but we don't use it, this goes back to what the late Pak Adi Alatas, who is a key member of FPCI, once stated. When Malaysia is one of those countries that has benefited bilateral organized disputes or gray area, when Indonesia tried to solve the dispute with Malaysia based on the ASEAN High Council of Conflict Resolution, Malaysia actually went behind the scene to actually the late Pak Adi Alatas, a very eminent barista. Please don't invoke that mechanism, because when you invoke that mechanism, that the rest of the member states in ASEAN will do the same, and we will have a headache. We will not be able to solve so many bilateral disputes. So Indonesia, out of the kindness of their heart, restrained and decided to go with the Malaysia plea. So to the degree the ASEAN High Council has not been working, it's because Indonesia has been very kind and Malaysia is the prey and risked us to using that mechanism. And coming back to the issue of quiet diplomacy, Malaysia has what is known as quiescent diplomacy. Quiescent is different from quiet diplomacy. Quiescent means that we are willing to do everything quiet, but we will not concede on issues merging on territory or sovereignty. So there is a difference. Quiet, but behind the scene, we'll make the necessary protests, follow or follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me carry on, pursue the issue of Myanmar crisis. I'd like to hear your view, Hong, in terms of the mechanism of Secretariat Office. What is the way forward for Secretariat Office in order to address Myanmar crisis? Do you think there should be rule for member states to try to change the course or seeking solution together?
Well, I think we have to begin with the reality that the fact that ASEAN has been rather ineffectual in exerting its influence over the current situation in Myanmar the past few years is because that our sticks and carrots are limited. They are simply not as consequential when weighed against the Tatmadaw, the SAC, when it comes to their survival, right? And on the other hand, the SAC has other allies and partners. Russia for arms, China for continuing economic ties, and both Moscow and Beijing for certain political shelters so that they can, continue what they have been doing. The second challenge lies within ASEAN itself because we have among the 10 ASEAN member states, before Timor-Leste joined, we haven't been able to come to an agreed, a shared strategic consensus on what we want out of Myanmar. Because within ASEAN, we are kind of divided between two groups. One is still very much values-based, values-driven. And the other is more pragmatic, more realist. And that's why so far you mentioned the ASEAN Secretariat, the Secretary General. But I think with every ASEAN chairmanship, with every ASEAN summit, we have tried with another kind of bureaucratic solution, bureaucratic mechanism. First of all, the envoy of the chair. But the envoy of the chair cannot do it much. Then, we want to have like the envoys of the troika envoys of the previous, current, and the upcoming chair. And now they are thinking of a longer-term chair, envoy of ASEAN. So I think the solution has so far been very mass process. Partly, I think mainly because the strategic impact is not seen. And the Secretary General ASEAN has always also tried to have, but I think his role he's making limited to supporting the envoy of the chair as well as the ASEAN coordinator for humanitarian assistance. And so far, I think humanitarian assistance is the area where ASEAN has been able to make certain impact. So I think the question facing ASEAN now is more a kind of very hard and consequential strategic question. Do you want Myanmar, for all of its flaws, and by Myanmar I mean the current de facto SAC, for all of its flaws, to be within ASEAN or outside of ASEAN? Do you want to exert influence over the Tatmadaw outside or with it inside ASEAN by, helping us to build capacity and gradually, hopefully, can open up the political space bit by bit? There is no guarantee of success, but that has been a road that has been traveled before this book. And are we okay, looking at the country slide into further chaos and slip further into the strategic influence of other powers? So to come up with this kind of strategic interest and what we are prepared to do with the Tatmadaw acting, there must be careful trade-off, right? We cannot have both. But this is something that it's still difficult to achieve because ASEAN member states are still quite different, when it comes to their approach on how ASEAN should deal with this. Thanks.
I got notified that we got only 5 more minutes in terms of discussion or conversation before I will open up the floor. But given that our time is limited, so I'd like to hear the view from all of you in terms of the way forward for ASEAN. So let me get back to you, Ima, in terms of economic gravitas or economic magnet of ASEAN in the near future, because right now we have RCEP, we have ASET, but under this global competition, great power rivalry. What should be the way out for ASEAN in order to maintain economic attractiveness as a group?
Well, I think it brings us to the question of asset centrality as a group, because I believe the podcast look at by scan as a group rather than individual speaks. But centrality of something to be earned, it is not something arbitrary. So ASEAN also needs to work internally, solidify our work agenda, not to compete with each other unnecessarily. In the context of our external partners, winning more from, let's say, EU, but that block other countries get it sick, the preference for EU, for example. So let's be realistic that we have a lot of platform integrated in ASEAN, ASEAN Sea Block, Indo with ASEAN Territory, custom relation, and so on and so on. We have hundreds of thousands of agreements in economic sectors. So let's focus on that. Be ecosystem with what in agreed among ourselves, and also the word that we want to talk. And we have the respect of colleagues. They can leverage that position to put the ASEAN center of global value chains, and particular collisions not as indicators which represent huge market in the world. So I think I tend to make a criticism against ASEAN itself, rather than projecting ASEAN to the other world, to the outside. Look, let's join us and let's invest in ASEAN. Let's check with ASEAN. But I think the first of ASEAN is public size.
It is very tempting. When we look at framework, which now existing the ASEAN or in this area, we have Quad, we also have IEK, and we have ASEAN. So for economic security framework, do you see what's the relevance of ASEAN, in which new form of framework is also emerging in the region, especially in terms of security?
Well, I think the emergence of the multilateralism like copy is what challenging ASEAN, because the authors what will have others. They're all very exclusive. I think for membership, and also very exclusive narrow methods of interest. ASEAN mechanism stipulates it inclusive as a first comprehensive cooperation. Now, I think the unities of purpose and is due to the fact that ASEAN that mechanism cannot cater to all the interests of these markets, and that's why they create their both. But they are very, like I said, very exclusive, and they're very limited to the area of cooperation. So they are not competitive with ASEAN. But of course, we have to be aware and make sure that the issues, important issues that affect our region proactively, should not be determined only by these small couples, a small number of countries in this small millimeters. That is what we have to make sure. The issues are affecting our collective interests that has to be dealt with in the larger or inclusive multilateral setting that ASEAN that established. Sekolah dan kita tahu we already have a strategy to deal with this current turbulence. That is the main thing, is that we want to promote cooperation instead of competition. We developed the Vical Task and Outlook class, and all our partners have acknowledged and support the AOI. And I think the only Indo-Pacific related strategy that have been widely acknowledged, in fact, in even widely supported, is only AY. The US, European countries, China, they had their own individual, their own individual Indo-Pacific strategy. But it only applies for themselves. Nobody support that. But the AOIP is collectively supported by all countries. It's a good platform to promote cooperation in order to offset the current competition that now exists within major powers that affect your country.
We have Treaty Act of Amity and Cooperation TAC, in which we have 47 signatories. What should ASEAN do more or exercise more in terms of having this as the tool for ASEAN?
Well, when I was at the ASEAN Secretariat, I also, our portfolio includes the TAC actually, and particularly just now mentioned the lack of utilization of ASEAN dispute settlement mechanisms, and chief among them is the High Council, the TAC High Council, and I do share his views and the concerns of ASEAN member states. Actually, the point of having all of these formal dispute settlement mechanisms is not really to use them, but more to have it as an encouragement for countries that are in dispute to try to agree among themselves first, right? And these negative suits are mainly for two purposes. One is project in ASEAN that is rules-based. The second is to make sure that, we still have the regional resolve, that ASEAN has a role to play, which is written in the ASEAN Charter, that we have the responsibility to ensure peace and stability in the region, and that, of course, includes the handling of a peaceful relationship among its member states. The TAC itself, with how many? 47 high contracted parties. I am not very impressed about this number, although it is a good thing to promote about ASEAN role as a norms builder, about, the fact that many countries around the world from all continents and all of these 5 members of the UN Security Council have acceded to it. That means that they support and they love our norms and principles, which are actually written in the UN Charter anyway. So I think acceding to the TAC is more or less a pathway or a channel for external parties from the FARC to convey their interest in engaging with the region, to explore cooperative opportunities with ASEAN, although they are far away. This is very encouraging. But to use that as a mechanism to deliver some strategic impact out of the growing number of high contractor parties to the TAC, I don't think it is a very effective pathway. So the TAC is a treaty, but I think it is a very important political instrument, actually, to promote ASEAN norms and for outside partners to show their support to ASEAN as part of their strategy to engage with the region, but to use it for operational purpose, I think it is not really an effective pathway.
Okay, thank you for all the speakers that we have time for now for sharing of the conversation. Now I'd like to open up the floor for Q&A session. We have about 20 minutes. So I'll take the first round of 4-5 questions first. I see many hands. Can you introduce yourself briefly and then go straight to the question?
Hi,
My name is Pasha. I'm from Indonesia Ocean Justice Initiative, which is NGO based on maritime affairs. What I want to ask is, there's been a lot of noise and criticism in media that not only Malaysia's championship, but actually ASEAN championship throughout the past few years has been utter disappointing and underwhelming. So I guess what I would like to ask is from the speakers is, what do you each of you think makes a good ASEAN church? As in, what are the specific metrics you would use to determine the success of an ASEAN championship? Thank you.
Okay, first question about ASEAN championship. Let me turn to the next question. Yeah. The next one can be a woman. Question for a woman.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. Sorry.
My name is Haris Pasaraki. I'm from International Relations from South Roberto. As we know, the reason in any action is not really effective in Myanmar crisis or South China issue is because the ASEAN non-interference principle. This might be a really simple question that frequently asked, but that's why it is important. It's non-interference policy in ASEAN is branded the ASEAN as a regional organization, or this weakened Asian ability to respond to the conflict to maintain the reform stability. Thank you.
Thank you. The issue of interference principle of ASEAN. Okay. Let me have the expression from a woman. Yeah. To spread question in terms of demographic.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Risha from TCI chapter Manifesto of Gajah. So I basically have two questions. First is, amidst the climate crisis and that it might spill over to some other aspects like economic fragility and food security and other consequences, what do you think ASEAN should take as a concrete action to respond and to tackle these issues, not just rhetorically? And second, as Ms. Wong just mentioned regarding that one of the women at SAC is that member states must insist on having an asset first. So what do you think ASEAN should do to tackle this internal difficulty?
Thank you. Issue of how ASEAN to cope with climate crisis and economic security. Can I have next from that corner? Any?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the chance. My name is Lucas. I'm from the MSC of Peddlers in Janam Common of Development Policy of ASEAN. So, well, actually, I would like to continue the question that previous colleague asked before. So, we know that ASEAN faces challenge in navigating high sensitivity geopolitical issues, but we see significant momentum in functional sectors such as ASEAN Oil Grid and the recent review of ASEAN's put and the COP30 imbalance. So how do you see the issue of this strategic pivot toward less sensitive, high impact areas as a functional operation over a viable parallel, say, or ASEAN's continued apparatus? Thank you.
Thank you. Power grid is that?
Yeah, ASEAN Power Grid.
ASEAN Power Grid
Also environment-related issue.
I'll have last question for this round of this segment.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is PIFO IRO by Business Covered by here. My question is basically about the current developments of accessibility, especially of the on the current degradation of the law-based world model and the rising hour-based model. As we know, ASEAN stability is decided to the stability within ASEAN and the stability of ASEAN. And as we know currently, the stability within ASEAN is stagnating with each member state. If multilateralism that is not in line with ASEAN multilateralism and realizing multilateralism that are currently approaching towards ASEAN. My question is basically, how can ASEAN move forward into the future? How can ASEAN still maintain the development of ASEAN stability in the future?
And what path should ASEAN take? Because some say ASEAN should become like EU. It should be a sort of national institution, but some also say it is impossible for ASEAN to be at this step in
a supranational institution. Instead, we have to maintain our current intergovernmental organization. And how can we make that intergovernmental configuration whilst also strengthening the relevancy of ASEAN stability and the within and of ASEAN in the Indo-Pacific and Oceania Pacific? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have got 5 sets of questions from 5 speakers, and I'll give freedom to each speaker to address the point that you like to respond to each speaker. Let me begin with Park.
I'll try to address the questions very quickly. On the first question, ASEAN Championship, what is the key performance metrics to measure the success? Who was the one who raised it? Okay. So I can actually look at here. From where I go, both from foreign embassies and Malaysian government's standpoint, the key performance index measure of success is to make sure that it is security incidents free. In other words, there are no serious security incidents during the whole year of the event. People normally talk about ASEAN summit in May, and in this year in Malaysia there was ASEAN GCC and ASEAN plus China Economic Summit. And towards the end of the year there was a G6 summit. But in truth, we got a chairman of ASEAN summit. The exact word is ASEAN and related summit. But throughout the year, you have more than 330 meetings that you have to manage, not just few summits. So in the case of Malaysia, we managed to keep it free from security incident. I hope that's a measure of success. And trust him without any incident. 2, ASEAN did not talk about South China Sea and Myanmar this year. Who was the one who raised the question? I can say that behind the scene, ASEAN did talk about this issue. And when I refer to the word behind the scene, for instance, I was in the listening room of the ASEAN Summit intake. In other words, the leaders are speaking somewhere, but I'm in the room able to listen to what they say. The word South China Sea didn't come up at all, even when it was the turn of the President of Philippines to speak. When I try to understand from my colleagues in Prime Minister's office why, that's because Malaysia has explained to President Pratina, let's not raise this issue in open, try to address it quietly with China. The third question, if I may, is the climate crisis and how it has affected the region of ASEAN. Am I right? Here I have to say that, and I think I had conclude by the end of this, that's the third question. I do not know the damage in Sumatra, but I do know that Hat Yai, the city in southern Thailand, has been badly affected by the rainfall over the last few days, and it was the worst rainfall in the last 300 years. 90% of that city is completely devastated. Can Hat Yai make a rebound? I'm not sure. That could well be the first case of a city, a popular city in ASEAN, unable to have any economic revival anymore. In other words, we have been shown a clear example of what the climate crisis can do to various cities. In fact, as we are speaking right now, there is a huge debate going on. Should Jakarta be moving to Nusantara because Jakarta is sinking? That's also another issue. So Hat Yai, completely devastated. My belief is that it cannot make a rebound because every year when ASEAN receives ZE foreign direct investment, the actual figure is about 250 to 260 billion US dollars. 50 to 60% of that is invested in Singapore, and that only distributed across the region. So I hope that answers at least 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me manage time here. For the 3 of you, we not have to address or respond to every question. You have about 3 minutes.
Oh, well, on the ASEAN Summit question, to add on, as an outsider, I also share the perception that, all of these joint declarations and statements have been very much, for performative optics rather than for substantive impact. But, and also, it's, year by year, you have seen the accumulation of all of these statements. And we don't know how far and how effective these statements had been followed up. I'm sure they are followed up, but not necessarily very to the full extent or effectively. But as an insider, I would like to explain a little bit. When a chair country, and I have a lot of sympathies for a chair country, handles the ASEAN chairmanship, and when it comes to a high level like the ASEAN Summit, first of all, the deliverables are must involve the contributions of all the sectoral bodies. And it is not only from the diplomatic or security side, but also, for example, sustainability, disability empowerment, women empowerment, humanitarian assistance, so many areas of functional cooperation that our line agencies should put forward. The second part is the leader themselves, right? Especially the leader of the chair country, but also leaders of ASEAN. They must go there and come home with something to sell as the deliverables and KPIs. That's why we have to reconcile and, combine with both of these, political imperatives as well as the need for more substance and impact in our collaborative action. For the ASEAN centrality, maybe another, I completely agree with Michael's point that these minilaterals, they don't compete with ASEAN per se. They stay in their own lane to serve their own strategic purpose, mostly concerning their shared perceptions about the strategic challenge coming out from China. And there is no denial that these minilaterals tend to overshadow or even dilute the self-claim role that ASEAN has for itself as a driver of the regional architecture. But I think laymen think that fact is of little good because we should be beyond that stage already. I think the key for ASEAN is to stay on our whole lane, as Fa Iman has mentioned, to invest in our old people. And there is a huge need for education and skills for development for our huge young population in this new age, right? So we have a lot of untapped potential and needs that need to be addressed. And also you mentioned the ASEAN Tower Grid, which is also a very good example of some select areas where we must identify and focus our resources and our political will to deliver, especially in terms of energy security and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief and resilience against pandemic impact is another important factor. So I think that we have to look at ourselves, invest in our region, and there are a lot of areas where we can do together. And by identifying needs, for example, in education and security and technology, we are both we can provide both the agency uh, and also the shaper, the owner of the narratives. We are not simply the recipient of humanitarian aid or technologies. We are beyond that, Daddy. So we have been more confident in ourselves and to work together, and if we work together, we have greater confidence, actually. This is something that you said that, we don't think of ASEAN first. It doesn't have to be ASEAN first all the time, but ASEAN is most often a very conducive platform for your country to promote and defend your national interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Iman, you'd like to respond to some questions?
Yes, definitely. I think there are some interpreted questions that I try to respond to this question in a general perspective. I think it's some for Asia to realize that we need to reposition our supply chains as this. ASEAN should benefit from partial US-China decoupling, but this coordinated ASEAN-wide strategy to avoid zero-sum competition among ASEAN. Secondly is the upgrading trade architecture. Where was CIFP? It has been mentioned several times. It is now ASEAN's strongest economic thinker. ASEAN must leverage it or rules harmonization facilities and supply chain resilience. And I think we have this reference of making digital economy boost, digitalization national plans such as AFA, passport data flows, digital payment system, connectivity can serve as region's new central ecosystem. And green transition, we have this just energy transition partnerships. Carbon markets and regional power grids are emerging platforms to sustain economic relevance if Asia can align standard and commitment. Now, I think it please give back to the central role of Asia in bringing this agent and care to the next level. I think Asia should leverage its agility of agility. Asia flexible incremental approach can be decided and in asset in a fragmented world, allowing the powers to interact zero and low tension platform. And ASEAN has this convening power as Asia folio, Asia-led mechanisms such as East Asia Summit, ASEAN Plus 3, ASEAN Regional Pub, ASEAN Defense Minister Plus to include the Asia, but also India, US, China, Russia, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand has only been used where all major the Pacific players can be formally and clearly, and we need to make use of the economic diplomacy as stabilizer. Conversation, discussion, logic, first and connectivity is big. Can be capitalized as confident periodic tools, even amid political disagreements. But again, and I will continue to air my white here, the need for ASEAN to make a strong leadership torpedo, because how you could ask for other countries to respect you if properly we have no solid views, strong vision, and cooperative strategy on how to deal with this problem. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have this notion of ASEAN Plus. How we have this need is a necessity, develop our own economies based on our own setting. But there are areas where ASEAN countries need to coordinate their forcing, their strategy in dealing with external countries. And have to remind ourselves that we have lots of economic agreement in ASEAN, but there is lot more national variation of discipline. I think that's the long-term homework that need to be addressed urgently if time of changing or global landscape for economic growth. I think that will be my heart.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you. Well, every ASEAN just has two tasks. One, they have their own national priority to be taken up Eureka chapters. And then they also have to participate the working of long-term ASEAN project or initiatives under the three pillars. So then these are two tasks about this chapter. Now the work of the chair is practiced in the joint statement, either at the ministerial dialogues as well as at the summit level. This may seem a slightly second, but it is very important for the work of ASEAN because if a new initiative is not reflected in the statement, either at ministerial or summit level, or if an ongoing project it has been taken out or not reflected in the statement, that means the new initiative will not fly, or the importance of the ongoing project become less important for us, and that principles eventually phased out. So all this blame statement is very important because it's the basis for the burn of ASEP internally as well as with our top partners. Because the basis for our work with our partners also based on the joint statement issued with our partners. And the measurement of the success of the FPCA will be measured on its ability to carry out its goal priorities, as well as to carry out the ongoing, make progress with ongoing project of ASEAN. And I think the ASEAN electric grid is an example of the ongoing project of ASEAN that will be taken out from one chair to another chairmanship. Yeah, it's a continuing, and some of them are very, very strategic, but it doesn't get the highlight from the news because it's not controversial, but it's very important for the world of ASEAN. And many of the socio-cultural and economic projects that are very important are not being duly or disseminated to ASEAN. So many of us doesn't actually recognize many of the works that have been very useful for the businesses as well as our community, because it's already reflected in joint statement, and nowadays nobody wants to do joint statement. But still, it's very important for ASEAN to work. But this is a shortcoming. ASEAN needs to inform its own stakeholders internally on the work of ASEAN, so everyone will really understand that ASEAN works for them. I think this is one of the shortcomings about ASEAN. Could inform our own stakeholders a lot benefit of the work of ASEAN. And without the support from the stakeholders, of course, it will be very difficult for ASEAN to make the progress. It's only between government and government. A bit about the non-interference issues. As mentioned earlier, the main purpose of this ASEAN is to achieve peace in Southeast Asia, meaning interstate relationship with Southeast Asia. Non-interference is very important in this regard because without the assurance of non-interference, there will be bloodlust, there will be always anxieties or even a distrust from, especially when we have countries as big as Malaysia, and then our neighbors small countries like Singapore or Turbulent. Of course, it's understandable for Singapore or Koreans to be anxious about Indonesia because of the size, shifting, asymmetric structure to those outputs. So why is Singaporean, Bruneian trust Indonesian? Because Indonesia here to not interference, I suppose. So in terms of the overall objective ASEAN, non-interference is very important. Make sure peaceful relation between always. Now, by the way, non-interference not invented by ASEAN. It's a universal principle. Of course, there is cases like Myanmar where we hope we can take more
contributions. And probably this contribution needs to have some kind of coherence. This is where we have to find the right balance in what hand. Preserving the non-interference and trust for ASEAN countries, and while at the same time addressing more effectively on certain issues such as the Myanmar. So finally, strike that is important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you for all speakers for your comment and your insightful analysis about ASEAN. And thank you for participation, active questions of the audience. And we can see how ASEAN is navigating increasing complexity of the turbulent world. And it seems to be that ASEAN has worked to be that inside ASEAN ourselves, that we have to be more coherent and try to amend the conflict within ASEAN to strengthen ASEAN as a group in order to cope with the outside external forces from the more increasingly turbulent world. Thank you very much for all the speakers, and please give a big round of applause for the speakers.
Thank you very much to our panelists for such an insightful discussions. Once again, everyone, please let's give a big round of applause. Before closing this session, we invite the panelists to remain in stage, or you may stand in front of the stage. As a token of appreciation, souvenir on behalf of Dr. Dinapati Jolal and at PCI will be presented to our panelists.
Please.
Very more. Legal voice.
Oh,